I asked our speakers today to start with a mini case study, if you will. Joe, perhaps we'll begin with you. And by the way, Joe, congratulations on after years of working at various biotechs, having just established your own consulting company. So congratulations to you, and maybe we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Great to be back with OP Live, and thanks to all those who've called in. So as Lewis said, we're here to talk about case studies in supply chain reliability, and I'm going to jump right in. This particular case study I'm sharing is really my experience in small molecules during my days in small molecules, and has stuck with me really across multiple modalities, aiding in manufacturing strategy planning for many assets. And so to set the stage, a pharmaceutical company decides to buy equipment, a filter dryer, at a CDMO. And this was right before a phase 3 manufacturing campaign. The timeline was tight, and we knew there were risks with this equipment not being a good fit for the process, but the equipment was there. It was an opportunity to stay on the track, and we knew the risk going in. And so the challenge was executing this campaign successfully, but also thinking ahead towards PPQ. Can this CDMO successfully execute a PPQ? And for folks who have called in who aren't sure what PPQ is, very quickly, it's process performance qualification. It's part of your process validation, and at a high level defined as 3 consecutive batches manufactured reproducibly against set quality criteria to demonstrate process robustness. So we went in eyes wide open with this phase 3 manufacturing campaign, and to de-risk this phase 3 delivery and also future PPQ, we onboarded a secondary supplier to be part of the phase 3 study. Now, it's worth mentioning at this point that there's tremendous pressure from the pharmaceutical company that I was working with to make it work with the primary, because we made a capital purchase of equipment. So we want it to work, and everyone wants success. So I'm happy to say we got through the phase 3 delivery of the material at both the CDMOs, which was great. So phase 3, check that box. We now had our eyes set toward PPQ. We begin to execute the PPQ manufacturing campaign at the primary supplier, and Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. It's not working in this piece of equipment. To make it work in this piece of equipment is going to take time, money, people. It's not going to happen in the time that we need it to be done for the program. So with this major challenge, we decided to pivot. We decided to pivot to the secondary CDMO to become our primary supplier. And we were able to do this quickly and efficiently. And the way that we were able to do that was, as we were going through the PPQ readiness at the primary, we had been setting up the secondary supplier in parallel to prepare for this exact scenario. And the rate limiting step to all of this was the GMP starting material. And so we bulked up enough GMP starting material ahead of time and had it ready to go at both CDMOs in the event that we would have to execute a PPQ campaign at either one of them at any given time. And from a business risk perspective, it made a lot of sense based on the spend that we would have had to do to bulk up that GMP starting material. So from a materials perspective, great, check that box. Now on to capacity. So the first part on the capacity side is this is a larger campaign. So sure, this could be a potentially lucrative partnership, but that's not the reason that we were able to pivot so quickly. The reason that we were able to make this happen so fast was with transparent communication the entire way through with both the CDMOs. And what I mean by that is the secondary supplier knew that they could be called on at any given point, and we had jointly gone through scenario planning ahead of time if we had to pivot. We were sure that we knew that we had to make capacity reservation ahead of time and have optionality within that reservation, so that we could flip that switch if we needed to. And the primary supplier on the other side knew it may not work out. Success was expected of the primary, but we knew there were risks going into it, and contingencies within the contracting were considered for that piece. And let me take us just down a really quick side note on this. Sometimes when companies are working with CDMOs, 2 CDMOs at the same time, in this sort of situation, whether it be a large manufacturing campaign or even early phase feasibility, companies will sometimes take the approach of completely keeping these CDMOs in the dark and not wanting to let either CDMO know that they're working with one another. This is not a great approach, in my opinion. They're going to find out regardless, even if you think that you're keeping it a secret. And you're actually closing doors for yourselves on optionality for manufacturing and development strategy. So keep that open. Try to stay as transparent as you can, which really leads to the closure of this case study, where ultimately relationship management was absolutely critical in executing any of our manufacturing strategies that we had planned at either CDMO. And finally, it's important to take an eyes wide open approach to really properly de-risk your manufacturing activities. But I'll say one thing, don't overdo it with the de-risking. Resist that temptation. And maybe we can go into that a little bit later. But with that, Lewis, I'll hand it back to you.
Very good, very good. Joe, before I move on to Susan, this specific piece of equipment, why was it so important? You had to put it into your risk equation and deal with it that way. Was that the piece of equipment that you had purchased at the CDMO?
It's a long, windy, and complicated story, but at the very high level piece of it is this was a filter dryer that was the right size to process the amount of material we had to bring through for a late phase manufacturing campaign, but it wasn't quite a great fit for the facility in which it was already in, and it wasn't quite a great fit for the process. So going through the risk assessment, we identified what those risks were, we mitigated what we could in the time that we could, but we understood that there still could be some issues with moving forward with this piece of equipment.
Very good. And did the secondary source have have the same piece of equipment, but it fit better into their facility, or how did that work?
I would say it was a like for like, but a better fit for our process. The way that it was set up was more streamlined and easier to execute on. And for that reason, from a PPQ perspective, when you're looking for reproducibility in a robust process, it was a much better fit for us.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. So I guess the overall theme here is obviously a backup source to understand clearly your risks and be ready to take action should what you don't want to happen. And that's very good. The contract with the secondary CDMO was ready to be signed. How did that pivot, as you say, happen so quickly?
So it was really so since we already had that CDMO as part of the phase 3 manufacturer, we had already a nice framework. We understood what the capacity was. We knew through just transparent communication when would we need to sign on the dotted line to reserve any sort of capacity. And we had at least a small reservation to start bringing in commercial manufacturing with that secondary CDMO down the line. So it was really just about an acceleration. We also had shared when we had planned to run this PPQ. So I think just from having open dialogue, it opened up more options than say what the four walls of the contract would have typically given us.